Okay, when we're looking at our transformations, we have two different things that are going to, or two big ideas that are going to come up a lot. We have congruence and we have orientation. So what I want to talk about here is our orientation. Before we can get started, you have to know what orientation means. Orientation is the direction that something is facing. So which way it's oriented is saying it's either facing to the top, or it's facing the left, or it's facing the right, and that's our orientation. So we have here our four main transformations: translations, rotations, reflections, and dilations. And so what I want to look at is which of these preserves orientation. So to preserve orientation, that means the shape will still be facing the same direction after the transformation. It has nothing to do with size of the shape, but it has to do with the direction it's facing. So if I'm starting with my translations, again, we have to look at what does a translation do. It takes a shape and it slides it and it moves it to a new location. Now, in that slide, we have to ask ourselves, does it change the direction it's facing? The answer should be no. It should stay facing the same direction. So if I was looking at this triangle and I had side A over here, then when I get to my new shape, side or corner A should still be in that same spot because all we did is slide it. So, do translations preserve orientation? Yes. They're going to keep the shape facing the same direction after the transformation has happened. Now, let's look at our rotations. So remember, rotations, if I start with a shape, say that looks like this, and I want to rotate it, I'm going to all of a sudden have it down like this, right? So it rotates counterclockwise in this case, and it changes its position. So if we're talking about orientation, remember the big question is, does it face the same direction as it did before the transformation happened? So, does it look like it's facing the same direction? Should be no, right? Because if I was to label my corners, and I labeled this corner A, where would corner A be now on the new shape? It would be down here at the bottom. So A went from facing the left to facing down. And since that happened, we had a change in direction. So, do rotations preserve orientation? No, they don't. Because it takes that shape and it turns and changes the direction that it's facing. Now let's take a look at our reflections. Remember, a reflection is like you're looking in the mirror. It's close to the same size and or it is the same size and shape, but let's see what happens. So I have my triangle. Here's my original triangle. Then I have my line of reflection. When I reflect over it, it pops to the other direction. So again, the question I'm asking myself for orientation, is it facing the same direction as it was before the transformation happened? So we started here and now we're started on the left, now we're on the right. Does it have the same direction? No, it doesn't. Because again, if I put that point A right here in the corner, well, point A is now over here. So it goes from facing the left to facing the right. So our orientation, was it preserved or not? It wasn't preserved, right? Because it went from facing left to facing right. So this does not, our reflections do not preserve orientation. Last one we're going to look at is our dilations. So remember, dilation is either starting with a small shape and going to that bigger shape, or starting with a big shape and going to a small shape. So again, orientation is all about the direction it's facing. So we know our dilations change the size of the shape, but what we want to ask ourselves is, does it change the direction that the shape faces? So take a look at the examples I have here, and what do we think? Does it look like it's changing the way it's facing? I don't think so, because if I had here in my corner, corner A, my new A would still be in that same corner, right? They may be farther apart because it may have gotten bigger, or down here it may have gotten bigger and may have shrunk down and become smaller, but it's still facing the same direction. Our corners didn't turn, the shape didn't turn and face a new way. So, do dilations preserve orientation? Yes. Our dilations and translations are the only two that preserve orientation, and our rotations and reflections do not preserve orientation. So the two R's don't do orientation. They don't preserve it because they're going to change the direction that it's facing, and our translation and dilations do. So our big key thing to remember, orientation is the way the shape faces, and we're always checking to see, does the shape face a different way than it did when it started.